Okay, this is lecture notes for the Greeks, part 1. So here we go. Part 1. Things that you should know about the early civilizations of the Greeks. Probably the earliest civilization is the Minoan Society off the island of Crete. Their major city was Knossos, although they probably didn't call it Knossos, they probably called it something else, but that's what we call it. They are pretty much a maritime trade society, so goods coming into their island and goods going out. Um, we don't know as much about them as possible because they have um, they have an alphabet system that we haven't quite deciphered yet. So it's called Linear A. They also have a Linear B, which we have deciphered, but this language still hasn't been deciphered very much or at all. So maybe one of you guys will do it. So that's that on that end. Decline of this civilization pretty much happened in 1700 BCE. Starts with earthquakes, volcanic eruption, tidal waves. This area is prone for all those things. Then after that, you got foreign invasions, and by 1100 BC, you've got foreign domination of this island nation. So that's all we know about this group. The next group descended through the Balkans into the Peloponnesus, about 2200 BCE. The Mycenaeans are very much influenced by the Minoan culture, and their major settlement is at Mycenae. They pretty much are expanding through military conquest. So they're very much into conquering in that way as opposed to trade or peaceful negotiations. What do we know about them? Probably the most that we know about them. Um, Trojan War is something that's usually associated with them. We know about the Trojan War from Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey. But pretty much in this time period in Greek civilization, you have a lot of political turmoil going on. So it's a very dark time in the Greek civilization. But pretty much after 800 BCE, the Mycenaean civilization kind of disappears, and we really don't know what happened to them. So, what about the Greek civilization? As I mentioned, they're known as polis. They're city-states. They're an urban center dominated by the surrounding countryside. So you have farming going on around the city-state, and then of course they're filtering all that farming into the city-state. Different characteristics. All the city-states are different. Some have monarchies. Some have tyrannies, although tyrannies to the Greeks weren't necessarily a bad thing, and how people came to power through tyranny wasn't exactly a bad thing. So it wasn't necessarily an oppressor type person, or it could be, but in some cases it wasn't. And then some of them, of course, have early democracies. So they're all unique and all different, and they all have their own different styles and cultures, and they pray to different gods, or they're just different in every way. So let's talk about two of them. So the first one we're going to talk about is Sparta. It's a highly militarized society. Again, the movie 300 probably does the best job of showing this type of society. And the reason for that is because they've subjugated the people around Sparta, who they call helots. And they're pretty much serfs, and they're tied to the land. And this group of people outnumber the Spartans 10 to 1. So the Spartans are always afraid that they're going to be taken over by this group, and so therefore they're very militaristic because they don't want to lose control to this one group. So Spartan society is very regimented. Okay, boys are removed from their families about the age of 7. They receive a very harsh military training, and they're pretty much in active military service until they're about 30. And then around 30 years old, they can start to marry and have kids of their own. Not quite sure if when they stayed married, if they had a home, or they kind of went back and forth between their home and the barracks. But they pretty much stayed in the military service until about 40, 45-ish. Um, and then they're kind of um, let go of their military services. Um, Spartan society started to relax their way of life a little bit, but it wasn't until much later on. The other group, big difference, Athens, they develop an early democracy, um, but it's only for adult males that are citizens of Athens. Women and slaves are excluded from this democracy process. Um, so there's a contrast between Spartan right there. And there you have a picture of the Acropolis and the Parthenon on top of that. Um, Athenian Society, um, based on maritime trade. You have an aristocratic group that pretty much dominates everything through their holdings of land, and they dominate small landholders. And you have this conflict between rich and poor in the society, and it leads to a lot of class conflict and tension, almost to the point of rebellion. So there's this duality of within Athens itself. You're not going to find that in the Spartan civilization. So an aristocrat by the name of Solon kind of mediates this crisis. He says to the aristocrats, hey, we'll allow you to keep your large land holdings, but um, the poor, their debt is forgiven, and they ban this idea of debt slavery. They removed family restrictions against participating in public life, so they kind of loosened the reins a little bit on that. And they used to institute paid civil service. This way, they make sure that their government, um, hypothetically, isn't as corrupt as it was before. So if people are paid by the city itself, then chances are they're going to work harder for the city as opposed to other aristocrats. Probably the most important person in the politics of Athens is a guy by the name of Pericles. He rules from 461 until his death in 429. Chances are he probably died of a plague that happened in 429. But why is he so important? Because this is the golden age of Athenian democracy. He's an aristocrat, but he's very, very popular with everybody. He's able to kind of smooth things out amongst everybody. He starts massive public work programs, and he encourages cultural development of the city of Athens itself. So while you have all this um, great ideas and philosophies and cultural events going on in Athens, he's pretty much right in the thick of all the things, and he's able to juggle all these different groups fairly well, and everybody seems to be happier and more prosperous during his rule. Um, Greek colonization. Again, you have populations expanding and driving colonization because you just don't have enough space within these city-states. They branch out into coastal Mediterranean areas and the Black Sea. And so you have some examples are Sicily, southern France. Marcellus was a Greek colony, Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey, which of course will lead to the Persian Wars and the problems there, and southern Ukraine are all good examples of Greek colonization. So here you have a map of the Greek colonies in red. And as you can see, most of them are located near the Mediterranean Sea and by water. This makes obviously a lot of sense because they want to continue to trade with the mother colony, and of course, doing that is fairly a lot easier when you're by water and you have ships and you can facilitate trade. But they're also facilitating culture and language and arts and philosophy and ideas of thinking and different varieties of food and um, ideas about astronomy and philosophy. So it's not just trading of goods, it's also trading of goods and services and all those things that I just mentioned that make these colonies stronger and make them want to trade with their mother colony in a way that facilitates both riches for them and the mother colony. And of course, the mother colonies are getting richer and richer as they expand and have more colonies. Effects of Greek colonization, trade throughout the region, as I just mentioned, communication of ideas, and political and social effects. Um, Again, I can't stress enough that when we think about colonization, it's not just the actual goods that are being traded. It's so much more that's involved when you have colonization of a particular area. All right, so that's my really quick lecture notes on part one, um, and we'll travel on to part two in the next series. Thanks for listening.